Oh, cool, cool, cool. And adios. There it is. Hey, can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you. Wait a minute. See, this is why we do things early. Porque te digo que try now. No te oigo. I can't hear you. Let's see here. Give me one more second. Yeah, I have the one more thing. Hold on. How about now? Mm-mm. No. All right. I'm gonna figure this out. Un segundito. Uh-oh.
I got it. Can you
Oh,
hear me now? There
perfect.
we go. Ah,
Problem solved.
yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm well. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Good, man. It's been
How's
a little bit of a long day, but it's good.
it's a long day, but it's good, you say?
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be great. Doing this is gonna be reinvigorating. Having a
Excellent.
conversation with you is gonna be fantastic.
Excellent. I couldn't make up which hat I wanted to wear, my
Oh, I got one of those. I
or
got one of those.
or my professor
Oh, you know what? I can go grab mine. I have like my two hats are very similar to
There you
yours.
go, man. There you go, man. It's perfect. Uh, I have my notes here, and if you can just allow me just one quick second,
Of
I'm
course.
gonna make sure I
Take your time.
that
It's nice
there.
to put a face to the person I've been texting with or
Ah,
message.
thank you, my brother, and I can't thank you enough for doing this and for being on my podcast. Really quickly, I mean, I'm already recording, but my podcast aligns so much with, well, as I've done my research and what have you, just the idea of the intersectionality between art, poetry, life. It really kind of aligns itself very well with the themes in my show and the things that we talk about and that we have spoken about in the last almost 4 years now. So this is perfect. I can't thank you enough. And the way we go, this is a perfect intro. So everybody,
Well,
this is
first of all, though, bro,
oh, I'm
first of all, let
sorry,
me
Dale.
say, no, no, let me just say, like, you're thanking me. You're the one providing me with your platform to talk to other people, to spread the message. So I appreciate it greatly. I appreciate you supporting the book, getting a copy. I wish I could have signed it for you. But
Ah,
anyway, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but please go ahead.
no, 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 that's okay. And it's my pleasure to get the book. And speaking of the book, it's right here. And the way we
There it is.
go, still available at your local bookstores. I'm assuming it's at every bookstore. But I
Yes.
purchased my copy off of Amazon bestseller.
Yes, it is. Very
Yes,
surprised and happy about that.
Barnes and Noble's Renzo Del Castillo is the man behind still. We're going to get all into this. But first, welcome to Los's Lounge podcast, my friend.
Thank you, Lowe's. I appreciate you. Do you prefer Lowe's or Carlos? What do you prefer?
Whichever one you'd like, whichever
All
one you
right,
like,
man.
it's fine. Um, my best friend, my other co-host to the show, which is Harry, is
Right.
the one who pretty much calls me Los, but a few other of my friends do as well. I want to remind everybody that this episode is sponsored in part by our friends Magic Mind, and I also have to give a big shout out to my other co-hosts Jasmine and Harry, who won't be on this particular episode, but that's okay. And away we go. Renzo Del Castillo, award-winning and best-selling author, an executive leader, community builder. And if I get anything wrong, please correct me. From
No,
data
no.
analyst to data analyst executives to building on implementing strategies that benefit people within healthcare. Like many human beings, Mr. Del Castillo has faced trials and triumphs. Born in 1983, I'm 1982, shout out to that.
That's what's
In
up.
Lima, Peru, Renzo Del Castillo has a BA in English, specializing in Victorian literature, and an MA in mass communications, specializing in intercultural communications. Not only that, but he plays guitar, he sings, and best-selling author here with Still. So where do we begin? We begin right here. I always like to ask everybody, how did you sleep last night?
Oh man, it's been it's been well last night, but it's been a bit of a struggle lately. It's going to be for my dad passed away a couple of years ago, and his
Condolences.
birthday's coming up. The
Uh,
funny part is the
they both.
book was published on his birthday, not because I planned it that way. I actually planned it on mine, which is September 23rd. But my publisher was very nice in saying that I'm a very organized author instead of a retentive author. And we could publish it earlier, and it ended up being July 30th. So I said, yes, let's do that. So I have that on my mind, you know, just
Sure.
uh
Yeah, my
just having
deepest
that, but I slept
condolences.
well.
Yeah. Well, listen, I got to tell you, you are certainly, and like most human beings, hearing your story and hearing you talk on other shows and what have you, and just prepping for this, I was really blown away by a couple of things. Uh, your I don't want to use the word obsession like in a bad way, but just your
Let's
need
say
to
it.
educate yourself. The importance around that, the importance of what your father instilled in you if you walked into your home with a 95 versus 100, which we're going to get to that. So put a pin on that. um but also just the perseverance of the human spirit, right? And just what we're thrown a lot in our daily lives. You lost a lot of important people to you, and you kept going and you found your outlets to kind of which we're going to talk about, um to get through. So I salute you, I commend you, and I just want to throw you your roses publicly. And it's very inspiring. How are you feeling in this moment right now? And I'm sure you touched a little bit about that in your last answer, but
Like I told you earlier, I'm feeling really good. I'm looking, I heard a lot of the episodes of the podcast. I haven't gotten into season one, but I've heard a
sure.
lot of the episodes of the pod. So I was very don't no, come on. It's I'm excited to talk to you because I do feel that there's a connection in terms of, the immigrant experience and living in the United States, being part of multiple cultures and how art plays a role in that. And I'm excited to dig into that with you.
Well, I think that's a great place to start. Now, I know I've done the research and I know the story, but people watching don't. So I would love for you to start there and talk about your experience with that, coming from Peru to Miami.
Sure. So in Peru, my mother was the secretary to the Minister of Health. My dad was a major in the army. He was a fighter pilot with
Mm,
helicopters. It was really good. And for maybe your audience knows, there was a group in Peru called Shining Path, which was considered a terrorist group. And when they went to do a union negotiation with Dr. Lozno, who was the Minister of Health, they came armed to that negotiation. But my mom preyed on their misogynism a little bit and said, "Hey, do you guys want coffee?" Because they were like, "No one leaves the room." And she's like, "You guys want coffee? Yeah, let the woman go get coffee." And she came back with the cops, right? So they marked her for
ah,
death. They marked her for death from
or
that.
something.
And one of our nannies apparently ended up being a terrorist who infiltrated. They stopped her before she did anything. When my sister was born in the hospital, one of the nurses was a terrorist. They stopped her from doing anything. And there was a third instance that I can never remember. Um, and that's because, our parents did a lot to shield us from that. But when we went to our citizenship, our political asylum hearings, we had to know about that. And we were young, right?
Right.
So my mom said, forget that. And her big brother, my godfather, was already here. He had emigrated in the 70s, um, became a courier, and then eventually a vice president of an import-export company in Miami. So when I came up here, I was very lucky because he sponsored me to have a student visa. So I didn't
Mm,
go through a lot of the issues that a lot of my friends have gone through in terms of being here illegally. Um, and we came here, but it was a bit of a shock, right? Because in Peru, we were like upper, lower upper class, upper middle
yeah,
class. And here we really started out without having much, right? So
yeah.
I would see, I know you might have heard this, and I don't want to bore you, but I've gone into this in other podcasts. But for your listeners, one thing that really sticks with me is when, I don't know, it was like I think it was a Friday, and it was a Friday night, and it was dinner time, and my mom and dad were like, "Go ahead and eat. We already ate." And I was old enough to know that they were lying, but not old enough to understand the context. So
Hmm.
safe money, safety became a really big issue for me. And that's kind of where that started, how we came over here. We were very lucky. But one thing I want to emphasize is there's layers to it, right? So just taking you guys back a little bit around I think South America has a very weak civil society because they had to be under colonization for way longer than the United States was. They
Okay.
didn't have that geographical isolationism that the US had from its colonizer. So we were decolonized relatively late in the 19th, 20th century. So I think we didn't have a chance to develop a strong civil society, right? So
Noted.
you see a lot of far left governments, far right governments coming in and out, a lot of switches in between South American countries, Peru being one of them. So in the late 70s, there was a far left government that instituted an agrarian reform. So this agrarian reform, basically what it boils down to is they paid the industry owners with the coin of the new government, which wasn't worth much or anything, and they gave the industries to the workers, to the people, but they didn't educate the workers on how to run the industries. So that
Gotcha.
caused a big economic issue. Fast forward a couple of years later to the beginning of the 80s, you have El Nino, right?
Mm.
Destroyed the fishing industry. So you have this great poverty, this great economic crisis that hits the entire country. Wealth is allocated in Lima and other big cities. It makes sense to me that a group like Shining Path would come and develop, right? So think about it this way in terms of empathy. Let's say you're a father, you have 4 kids, and somebody comes with a gun and says, your kids are starving. They have 5 TVs. I'm not condoning it, but I'm beginning to, but I understand it. And what that did for me is I was lucky enough not to grow up with a hatred, right? Like you tried to get me, you tried to get my family. I benefited from that geographical isolationism by coming here to be able to see it from a different perspective. So it's a lot of complex things when you immigrate to a country, right?
Yeah.
Is it a better life? Are you running from something? Do you want better economic opportunity? And all of those things inform that mentality.
One of the things that I find within even the work that I do as a community health worker is that, and even now, I have a lot of cases and clients that are migrants from other countries, especially from Haiti,
Mm,
Somalia, different parts of Africa, Afghan, and what have you. But one of the things that I find is that, you know, and I do have a question after this, but they're kind of thrown out into the system without the assistance. Like there's sometimes some of my families are, they're able to find homes, but no one else is really guiding the ship. And so there's so many resources out there to help them that they need. I guess my question to you is, who was your shining light through all that? Who was your resources? How did you guys manage?
man, I was very lucky. I'm very blessed to have a lot of shining lights, the way you put it, right? My godfather, definitely by sponsoring us to come here, is one of them. To this day, he is a father figure for me, somebody I love very much. My mom, there is nobody stronger than my mom, dude. Maybe not for herself, but
Yeah,
for others. I don't know, like there's that typical thing, like
yeah.
she will give everything of herself to others. Even when we didn't have much, when other people needed help, she would give. My dad, his single-minded focus on self-improvement and achieving what you did there. My sister as my partner throughout all that, right? Even though we're 3 years apart, we both grew up in it. We might not have gotten along when we were growing up, but she's my best friend now, you know. Um, we definitely had that. And my grandparents, actually, for me, it was education, like
Yeah.
access to knowledge, right? So we didn't have much money, as I said, but libraries are free. And I was always reading books. My family always inculcated this need for I forgot, I think it was my grandfather, my mom's dad, who told me like knowledge is the one thing they can't take away.
Mm,
Like that is wealth.
mm,
That is true wealth, right?
yeah.
So the more you know, the more you're exposed. And honestly, I think that helps with creativity too, in terms of imagination. So would
Absolutely.
you ha would you have ever dreamt of flying if you've never seen a bird, as an example, right? I don't know. That's why I think it's so important to go ahead and travel and read and talk to people. Like we're not in the same like state, right? But we're having a
No,
conversation here,
right.
right? And I think that those would be the bright spot. I'll give you an example too, just in terms of like you were talking about the systemic governmental organizations that are here as an example for immigrants. South Americans were very different, right? So the
Mm,
American family unit is mom, dad, 1.3 or 2 point whatever kids, right? Us were mom, dad, padrino, madrina, abuela, abuelo, la tía, everybody's living in the same house as a community contributing, right? But when you come here, the system's a bit different. Everybody chips in, but only one person has the deed to the car. So one person gets the tax breaks, one person gets the benefits, and it's hard to navigate when you don't come from a system like that. That's why it's very difficult, I think, to get ahead. I think the American dream in terms of what's there. I think so. Let me preface it by saying this. I love the United States of America. This is my home. It has given me everything that I have now, but that doesn't mean I can't see where things are off. And
right,
that doesn't mean that I don't want to help improve it. And you
right.
don't help improving it by saying everything's perfect, right? There's definite gaps, but I think working together, which is one thing I think art helps with, collaboration and empathy, um, is how we're going to get ahead in a time when it feels like we're so divided. I know every generation feels like they're the most divided, and you go back in history and you're going to see similar rhetoric as we're hearing now. But it does feel different. And I'd much rather connect with you than dismiss you, if that makes sense.
Mm. Dropping gems, my friend. You are dropping gems. Hey, speaking of art, this next question, which was a question that was you had asked your audience, what would they like to know? So one of the questions that they asked you was, how does art expand human experience?
Yeah, I know who
Kind
that
of
was. That was
trickled into
actually my
that a little
girlfriend.
bit.
That was actually my girlfriend who sent that in. I know that for
Oh
sure.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, well,
yeah.
salute to her.
Shout out to Gurbet. She's great. But it's a valid question. And some of the things that her and I discussed too. So, okay. So if God exists for me, God, the universe, whatever,
Hmm.
it's in the space between you and I right now communicating. That's where the divinity lies for me, right? It's bridging that gap. So art to me develops an analytical relationship between yourself and an object. You're able to look at the book, right? You can see it. You know there's more to it. There's a
By the
cover.
way,
Is there
everybody,
something?
it's right here. Don't forget,
Yeah.
still is the
Plug,
book. Plug, plug,
plug.
plug.
So, but it's there, right? Like you take it or this sculpture or anything, and you look at it and you see it from different angles. You start
Right.
seeing different perspectives. And when it's a piece of art, when it's a book, when it's a poem, when it's a song, right? You can start seeing it. Well, what did the artist mean? And you start seeing it maybe from a perspective that's not your own. And that
Mm,
in turn, by definition, develops empathy. And in terms of the human experience, how art applies, I think art is our expression of this beauty and trauma of being human. And that's how we connect, right? Like, so when I wrote the book, and I've gone into this again, but this is a new podcast. I got to get out of that mindset. When I wrote the book, I was going through a pretty hard time in my life, right? My dad died in 2020. My grandmother died a couple years before that. My dog died the year before, 14 years. For those of you who are pet owners, you know that's tough. My cousin, who was my age, who actually got me into poetry in terms of writing it, passed away, and we can go into that as well. My
yes,
little
I have my
cousin
notes
died.
around that as well too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My little cousin, my best friend's mom, like all of these things. I had a relationship that I thought was going to be marriage, and that died around that time for a variety of different reasons. And I was at a place where I thought life had stopped giving me things and started taking them away. Emotionally, I felt that way. Logically, it's not true, right? Like I said, you and I are meeting today. Maybe you and I become best buds from now on. That's a gift life has for us today.
Yes.
Tomorrow, as long as you're
Connection. Yeah.
alive,
Yeah.
life can keep giving you things. But I was so closed off. And the way that I dealt with grief was ignoring it, focusing on what's next, living in the future. I wasn't in the present moment.
Mm.
I was moving too fast to grieve, right? Which comes out as acne or as back pain or as indigestion. It comes out like it's gonna come out of you. right? If you don't process these things that you're feeling. And until I realized that we are made up of all the pieces of everybody that we've ever loved and that's
Mm,
loved us. So think about it. Why do you like that hat? Maybe you saw it on somebody you admired, your favorite song. Who gave you that Ray of Light album for there, right? Like all these things that make up Carlos probably came from your mom, your best friend, your abuela, your somebody, right? The way you tie a tie, the recipe for chicken soup we make when we're sick, right?
hmm
And if that's true, they're still with us. They live in me,
mm.
right? Not to get all Lion King on you, right? But they live in you, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
I
yeah.
believe that.
Yeah.
Um, and also
Did you
you
just say
need
not
to,
to get all Lion King on you? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
not to
I
get all Lion King
was
on you. Yeah, it lives in you.
That's awesome.
So
Sorry.
they,
I'm sorry.
and the other part is you have to stand still. You have to reflect, like looking at a pond and seeing your
Oh,
reflection,
yes.
right? You
Yes.
can't keep, I'm a big proponent of creation and move and do, but you have to take a moment to process these things. And that's why I named the book Still for those two reasons.
Well, here's something I just want to, if I can interject really quickly and just add to um, everything you just said. I had it typed in here in terms of your loss, and as you're saying it, I'm like, did he hack into my phone? He just ruined my whole speech, my whole intro to the
We're
next segment.
connecting, man.
So
We're
this is we're
connecting.
connecting. It's synchronicity. I want to read you actually what I wrote. So, your late cousin once asked you,
Mm.
why don't you? Or I'm sorry. Allow me to just scroll back a little bit here. Uh, Divinity exists in the process and the spaces of people connecting. Is something which you just said earlier, but I wrote that down or I typed it into my notes. That's a fascinating statement. By the way, uh, your cousin, your late cousin, asked you, I believe, why aren't you happy? You weren't happy with some. Am I getting the story correct? Or
No,
what
no. So
that you really want
that's
to do?
that's my good friend Kurt,
I'm
who
getting
wrote
my
the
stories
actual
mixed up. Kirk, sorry.
Kurt. Yes. No, no worries. But let me take a step back. So
Go ahead.
let me ask you a question, Carlos. In
Sure.
your life, when have you felt closer to God, the universe, something greater than, when have you felt connected to something bigger than yourself? Has it been when you're connecting to other people? Has it been when you're off on your own? I'm just asking, what's your experience?
It could be when I'm connecting with other people, depending on the circumstance. But for me, a lot, I'm kind of alone a lot as well too. So for me, it's in those quiet times and those alone moments, the conversations that go on in here.
When you're connecting to yourself, you're reflecting, right? I mean, I think that's important. We all process things different way, but this myth, this Ayn Rand type individuality, like the triumph of the individual,
Yes,
even, man, even Michael Jordan had a mom, dude. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
it's we are the representation. Now we don't have to live our lives for that. There's that other piece, right? Like we sacrificed, you have to do what we need you to do because I couldn't do it. No, I don't agree with that. But I do think you have to pay homage to the legacy of all of the actions that came, the sacrifices, the joys, the triumphs that came before you. Um, so yeah, I definitely do. Me personally, I feel closer to something greater than myself in my moments of reflection like you, but also in these moments when we get to share what we reflect on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You run a podcast. You have something to say, right? I
Yes,
would
sir.
imagine that that's an important thing. And then in terms of my cousin, his name was Pablo Vendaño,
Pablo.
and he was in a hip hop group called Soul What in Miami in 2002 when we were in high school, right? Shout out to Soul What, Sammy and,
Hey.
and Hans and everybody. Um, but I was always into poetry, and he told me, "Why don't you write poetry?" And I'm like, "Nah, man, I'm not Neruda. I'm not Vallejo. Like, what do you?" And he said, "Dude, you're great at writing. You're great at communicating. Just try it." Right. And he was a very well-read person as well, right? Extremely well-read person. And he got me there. There's a poem here dedicated to him. When
Yeah.
he passed away, he was, to make ends meet in Philly, he would do bicycle food delivery. And there was one night, the roads in Philly are not great. There's a lot of cities in the US where the cyclists don't have great areas to do. And there was an accident and an SUV ran him
Oh,
over um, from five
mm,
years ago on Mother's Day, which was
mm,
great because my aunt got that knock on the door, right? But he's still with me in that. You know,
yes,
he'll always be part of that.
yes.
And then to answer your other piece, Kurt, he's a really good friend of mine. He's about 25 years older than I am. We met in grad school. We were in the same grad school program. And we have another friend that we're very close to called Inigo. He is the person who wrote the Spanish forward in the book.
Okay,
And it was important for me for them to be part of this,
okay.
right? Because they're very close friends of mine. But I think I have to take you a little bit back. So I went to school for aerospace engineering, right? And, and again, forgive me if you've heard this story, Carlos.
That's
But
okay. No, 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 no,
I
no.
switched it to poetry because I stopped being. I love dissecting like problems and analyzing them, taking them apart and putting them back together, right? So I was in aerospace engineering, but poetry taught me to appreciate that things existed at all, not how they worked or
Mm,
what doesn't work. It's just like let's just appreciate that that was there. And I switched my major to that. My parents weren't happy.
right,
Imagine,
right.
right? Like we sacrificed and this and that, but I had never rebelled. I was never the kid that stayed out where I wasn't supposed to be. I always handled my business. So they first time I rebelled, they went along with it. But it was after like you said, I'm from 1983. I'm 40 years old. For those of your listeners who were around in 2000 and from 2001 to 2006, it was after September 11th, right? The situation in the US was
It's a
much more
different
heightened,
temperature.
different temperature. I mean, you're in New York,
I am in Massachusetts.
you're in Massachusetts, but you're in that Northeast area, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so a lot of tension,
Oh,
right? A lot of
yes.
tension there, a lot of tension here,
Oh,
and
yes.
people were getting deported. I knew two people that got deported that went to study abroad. They weren't terrorists, and the reason for that it was up to the discretion of the immigration official at the gate at the time whether they let you back in, right? Some guy, some lady is upset that day, right? There something was off and then everything, all that struggle goes away. So I had applied to a program for Cambridge for poetry and I got in, had my portfolio. I was super excited. I wanted to be some long-haired hippie poet up in, up in the UK writing poetry. And my parents talked to me and I didn't fight them. We tried a bunch of things like a special passport, but we didn't have much money even then
Mm,
and everything when they lost it. So that was another $400 and $400 might have as well been like 40,000 at that point, you know.
I understand.
I was like, that didn't work. Just focus on this. So I did communications because
Right.
it had the aspects of engineering that I liked and it had the aspects of poetry of communication that I liked. And I became focused on being extremely corporate. Money, right? Money is safety. And it was hard to find a job because when I graduated, it was also, again, 2009, the year of the financial bubble. Nobody that graduated with me did anything that they went to school for. And
Mm,
if anybody in your audience can identify with this, you go, you have the experience, but you don't have the degree, they don't pay you market value. If you have the degree but no experience, they don't pay you market value. If you have the degree and the experience, they want three Olympic gold medals and they don't pay you market value, right? Like there's a way it's very
very true.
difficult to come
Very
in.
true.
So I ended up working at a call center for healthcare because I figured there's two industries in the US that benefit from inefficiency, law and healthcare. Everything else, you have to be efficient. In law and healthcare, you have a problem, you toss money at it. And money was my focus, right? Because money was safety. Nobody was going to turn off the lights. Nobody was going to go without food. You didn't have to beg anybody for a loan to pay the rent, right? That those are all things that motivated me. And I eventually went into that company. Within a week at that call center, I was doing projects. And then I went up, became a consultant, and then a people leader and an executive in my career. But I wasn't happy. And that gets to the
Mm,
point of in the story that you were talking about, Kurt.
yeah.
He's very close to me, and I just I had to come to Jesus with him, right? Like this is how
Yeah.
I'm feeling. And Kurt is a Southern gentleman from Alabama. And he has this very distinctive voice. He's a guy, you would love him, I think, from just our short conversation. One of my best friends. And he said, well, what are you passionate about? Couldn't answer him. I got mad at him, which is, you know, Whatever, we can get mad at our friends, right? But
Yeah,
totally
absolutely.
unfair. Totally unfair. But I
Yeah.
was just like because I was just everything I was passionate about was in relation to someone else. And I wasn't passionate. I was just trying to be safe. And there'll never be enough safety, right? There'll never be enough safety.
Mm, yeah.
So he said, we'll figure it out because your passions lead to your purpose, and a life of purpose is a life of joy. Okay. Eventually, I realized that I love, like I said, solving complex issues, and I realized that I solve complex issues in healthcare every day. And then the other passion that I have is I really like leaving somewhere better off than the way I found it. So I hope that your life is improved because we met, whether it be narcissistic or not. I don't know. Like, I want to leave it better off than I found it, right? I want you to be better off because we met, like I said. And I got to coach my team on a daily basis and hold up a mirror to show them who they are and why they're worth it, right? How good they are, what they are, because work can be a place, it's like a super toxic relationship if you let it, right? Like it
Mm,
makes you feel expendable and indispensable at the same time. Tell me if this sentence makes sense. I need to work 80 hours a week on this project because only I can do this, or I'll get fired.
no sense
I've
there.
heard it. I've
Yeah.
heard
Yeah.
it, right? People work so hard to get ahead, but then they're afraid they're going to lose their job. So are you the only one who can do it, or can you be expendable? It doesn't jive, right? There's this context, this narrative that I think we have to work through till we find our best selves at what we do. Because I think that if we actually are earnest and try, anybody can provide value, right? Um, so I did that, and then doing the thing that was making me unhappy, I became very happy. And it eventually, once my dad passed, I started writing poetry again with the encouragement of a number of people. And that's how I got there.
And I want to quickly just remind everybody that's still available at Barnes and Nobles as well too. Am I correct?
Barnes and Noble, Amazon, you can
Amazon.
have the hardcover, the paperback. I did the audiobook because I have a face for radio. No, they recommended I do it.
My guy said I have a face for it.
I did the Kindle version, and one thing I do
Yes.
want to note, the Kindle version is 99 cents all way. It's not a Prime Day deal. It's not that because art should be inclusive. I couldn't make it
Hey,
free.
we
If I could
love
make it
that.
free, I'd make it free,
We
right?
love that.
But it's 99 cents on Amazon.
So you touched upon two things in terms of leadership, working in healthcare, which I'm going to get to, but I really want to. I have my notes on it and my questions. You're killing it, my friend. I'm taking notes, and to your public speaking, I'm like, this guy is like my hero right now. No, God bless you, honestly. Let's get into still, but before that, and I kind of know some of your answers already. Uh,
Okay.
there was two poets you mentioned, Pedro Neruda,
Pablo Neruda, Chilean poet.
Pablo, and I'm sorry, I keep getting everybody's
No
names.
worries, man. I mean, hopefully this is an introduction to him, to you, which I would
Well, I've
love,
heard
man.
the name before. I've heard the name
Yeah.
before. And Bukowski?
Bukowski.
Bukowski.
Yeah.
Okay. So I
Bukowski,
want to
Charles
know
Bukowski.
this thing because for me, when I was poetry came obviously in school and whatnot. But for me, how I connected, I write as well and I do poetry and I've done it since I was 18. For
Well,
me,
I hope you can share some after the
you
show.
know
I'd
what?
love to see
Listen,
some.
I didn't even bring any of my stuff because this is about you, my brother. Trust me. So
After, I would love to,
so
I
I'll
just, on a
share some
personal
stuff.
note, I would love to see it.
All
I
right,
would love to
awesome.
see
I
it.
appreciate you. Um, with that said, Jill Scott released an album back in 2000, which was her first solo piece. And in that album, I
Yes.
was blown away between the balance between her poetry and how that meshed into the song. So when I heard that album, I started writing poetry. I've been fortunate enough via Twitter, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where she knows that this is
What?
my story because I posted myself talking about this. I tagged her in it and she commented back. It's on my Instagram. It's
Brother, that's awesome.
it
That's awesome.
blew my mind. Blew my mind. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of poetry?
Oh God, that's so hard. That's like asking me to pick my favorite James Bond. I don't
I
know. I don't know.
ah
I don't know. I love them all. So definitely there's three poets that have truly inspired me. I shout them out in the book. One is Pablo Neruda.
yes.
The reason that I love Pablo Neruda is, again, South American poet, but somebody that went from from surrealist, right? Using very complex words to somebody who wrote Ode to a Sock so that anybody with even
Yeah.
the lowest reading level could understand poetry, right? Like I love that. And he also wrote like 100 sonnets to his third wife, right? Matilde. Like that, just that, and every sonnet is different
Yeah.
and exciting and new. It's not like a repetition. So that takes a lot of skill. So I really admire him for that. I admire Bukowski because, and can I curse on this podcast?
Absolutely. Please.
He didn't give a fuck. And he
Thank
like
you.
that's a quote. That's a quote. That's a quote from him, right? Like he's somebody who said like poetry is business between the poem and the poet and nobody's fucking business. Like the way that he lived his life was don't care about what other people think about you, just express what you have. And that helped me because I know that you told me you have some poems that you'd like to talk about and discuss that you enjoyed in the book.
Yes.
And don't I typically don't discuss why I wrote them or the thing. And for you, buddy, we'll talk. We'll talk about them. But it's because
Yeah.
once I write it, it's not mine anymore. It's
Right.
yours.
Right.
And you have your own interpretation. So you create this new meaning. It becomes ekphrastic. Ekphrastic just means art created from other art. So like songs that are made because they were inspired by the Mona Lisa or something. Like that's
Mm,
you create new meaning from that, right? And the third one is this Polish poet, also a Nobel laureate, Wisława Szymborska. And she is amazing. She wrote this poem called Vocabulary.
uh,
And the reason that it hooked me was she was a Polish poet right after World War II. She was some of her active years. And the poem goes, La Pologne, is it terribly cold there? Is it terribly cold in Poland? Obviously speaking to somebody French because there was a lot of Polish immigration to France after World War II. And there were also the historical is that all these new countries were popping up that didn't exist before, right? In that
mm,
area of the world after World War II. And she goes into this whole diatribe of my people do their writing in mittens and icicles and walruses and all that stuff. But she says at the end, but I forget the word for walrus. I'm not sure about mittens. So she just goes, dearest madam, pas du tout. A little bit, not so much, right? Like pas du tout. And it's how much can be lost in translation when you're not able to use language as a tool to show who you are. I
mm.
the relationship that I was in that ended around the time my dad passed, we met in Paris on my 33rd birthday. I went on a trip to Paris. I went, fell in love, all the things, the songs, the music, the movies, everything, right? And I spent about 6 months out of the next 2 years there. Plus, I've always loved France. I read The Count of Monte Cristo when I was really young, and I got in me
Mm.
into Dumas. All that stuff really got into it. The music like Charles Navour and all that stuff. But I was the dumb boyfriend who was like, "Ouais, oui, no, no, right? Je m'appelle
Bonjour.
Renzo." Like it took a while, but because I
Yeah.
spent so much time there, I got up to maybe like a third grade reading level, being able to speak to people like I have balloon, but at least I was able to
You
speak.
can defend
And that
yourself. Yeah.
opened so many doors for me
Yeah.
in terms of understanding and being accepted by the culture and understanding it and enjoying it. And it also showed that I do have a brain and I do have a sense of humor and I do have empathy because I was able to use that. Plus, a lot of
Mm.
them speak English too, or Spanish because they're so close to Spain. And I speak Spanish, Portuguese as well, like close to there. So it's just language is such an important tool to show that empathy, to show who you truly are. And that the first time I was really hit with it in an artistic way was that Szymborska poem. So I guess the fourth one for me, there's so many, but lately I've been really into E. Cummings because of the way that he plays with E. Cummings. So he
Yeah.
plays with syntax and grammar and just does so many things that are revolutionary and playful, and it shows intelligence by taking showing a mastery of form but then deconstructing it because, okay, I know how to play here, but what if I do this? How do I get to the next level? And I really enjoy that from E. Cummings, but tomorrow it'll be different.
Uh,
So that's the
do I
Mount Rushmore.
even dare ask you who's on your Mountain Rushmore of hip hop if you listen to hip hop?
Oh my God, dude.
Come on now.
All
Come
right.
on now.
So
Because you know it changes every week for all of
it
us.
changes every week. It changes every week, but like,
Harry
so
would
blue.
really
Okay,
appreciate this
so
answer, so go for it.
So Blue in Exile, right? You know Blue in Exile?
No.
Okay, I'm gonna give you an album. It was Across the Heavens, and they just had like a 10 year. It's so good, so good. I
Across the
might be
heavens.
mispronouncing the thing. So hold on. I got you. Hold on. You know,
Harry, when you're listening to this, if you know this album, damn you. Damn.
uh Blue in Exile. Below the Heavens. Below the Heavens by
Below
Blue.
the heavens.
Love them. I mean, Wu-Tang, always as
Come
a
on,
kid.
Staten Island.
I have complicated feeling. I mean, Biggie and Tupac, it's always hard for me to choose, but
Gotcha.
complicated feelings now based on a lot of how some of that music was produced, right? Outkast.
Ah, very
I
smart
love Outkast.
answer.
So okay, so right now, Blue and
This
Exile,
week,
Tang, Outkast, and Lauryn Hill. I
wow.
think Lauryn Hill is
Who's
an effing
actually
genius.
in hip hop news, and further in hip hop news, the Fugees are coming back with another album, bro. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
be
yeah.
incredible. Um,
I can't wait. I just I've been burned by showing up on time to concerts before, but I'm not gonna get into that. But even then, love it, love it,
you
love it.
see the
No,
lady
that's
behind me? She's synonymous for telling you to get there for 8 o'clock, and then she gets on at 11, and you're walking out at 1:30 in the
yes,
morning.
yes, sir.
Believe
So hip hop, but
me.
it'll change tomorrow, right? Like you just got me, and I'm telling you what I'm listening to right now. Really,
Yeah,
feel
I
like a
know.
Tribe Called Quest, man. Like there's so many. You
Harry, did you
know
hear?
what
I
I
was
mean?
waiting for that. That's the answer. A Tribe Called Quest. So we are extreme enthusiasts of a Tribe Called Quest. Nas, Common, Busta
Of course,
Rhymes, Guru,
Buster. The other day, what was it? Bump Your Head, was it? Is that the title?
Breaking
Break Your
Neck.
Neck, Break Your
Yeah,
Neck,
yeah,
Break Your Neck.
Breaking Neck. Yeah.
So I remember that I knew every word
He
to
said,
it, and of
"Bump your
course that's
head."
like 2002. But I'm like I cannot rap along with this in traffic
Yeah,
anymore. Like there's
yeah.
nothing I can do.
His flow and
But
cadence is
yeah, like but hip hop
ridiculous.
is so tied into poetry, and
Thank
people
you.
don't realize that, right? They're like, no, this is song lyrics. It's not the same. Well, why
No.
does Bob Dylan have a freaking like Nobel Prize for his lyricism, right? You're telling me these people don't have that ability because it's
No.
music? And I'm not just talking about hip hop, any sort of music, right? Like, no, these artists, they're lyrical geniuses. The things that they do, the
Absolutely.
wordplay that comes in and out, it's just
Absolutely.
I really
Absolutely.
want you to listen to Below the Heavens, though, and you have to let me
I
know.
will. I did write that down. So I will check that out. Listen, once I'll give you a full report.
Please,
I'll DM you.
please.
um, so one of the things in my head, by the way, I love the word still. And you mentioned this earlier because you were going through grief. You weren't feeling the feelings. So in my head, after reading this book, it should be called If You Don't Sit Your Ass Down and Just Think. I feel like you didn't have enough room for that.
That's
So we're
right.
going to shorten that to still. But I really want you to talk about, at least for you and your experience, how important it is to feel those feelings and not let time go by, or just what that process looks like.
So
Looks
I
like,
think I have to
feels like.
I think I have to tell you that story. I think that 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 marked me in terms of my dad, right? So I want to preface it by saying my dad was basically like half Ted Lasso, half um, you know, Maverick from Top Gun, right? There's a very healthy ego that goes along with being a fighter pilot, but my dad was also very loving and corny and it was complex to get to know him, but when you did, like you couldn't help but love him. Like I'll give you an
Mm,
example. So like one time I was learning guitar and I focused on learning guitar and he saw it for years. He saw it. And then one day he goes into my room because we're gonna go watch a movie or something. He's like, okay, and then we can go eat here, blah, blah, blah. He grabs my guitar from me and just starts strumming a Puerto Montt by Los Iracundos. And I'm like, you play guitar? He's
mm,
like, oh yeah. But it wasn't important to him to let me like he didn't see that. Like he was very single focused, right? So of course I was like, come on, man. Like, or I remember he took me to see Zorro, the Mask of Zorro with Banderas, right? When
yeah,
I
I
was a
remember
kid.
that. Yeah.
And I learned that he was a champion fencer. No
Wow.
idea.
Wow.
No idea. But that's when it became pertinent. Like you think in all our lifetime, right? So I felt like I was always getting to know my dad. So when I was younger, I was an intelligent kid. I wasn't gifted. I had a pretty high IQ, all that. Not anymore. That's a quotient. It goes away with time, right? Not anymore, but as a kid, pretty advanced. And I would come home with a 95 and he would
I
say,
love the story, by the way. Tell it. Tell it.
I quote, man, like this is a straight up quote translated. He's like, "Were you sick?" So, he's at his desk, no glasses. My dad always had perfect vision as a pilot. Um, we're going through his papers and he's like, were you sick? Hmm. Were you emotionally
That's the other thing.
involved?
Yeah.
No, son. And he never yelled. Like my dad wasn't like this army guy who was like, "Blah, blah, blah." He was just like, son, what could you have done differently to get 100? Okay. Didn't matter that I set the curve, whatever. I come back next time with 100. Were you sick? Were you emotionally just, yeah, I'm like, okay, what happened? He's like, I see here that there are two extra credit questions you chose not to answer. Why? I'm like, because I knew I had 100. It's not efficient. It's just this is a 9-year old, right? 9-year old with like however old my dad was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Son, God punishes pride.
Mm.
If you want 100, study for 200. Okay.
Mm.
What was the end result? That I grew up thinking I was never good enough. Nothing I did was good enough, right? So, and my only value was what I could provide, which I think if we look at this epidemic of toxic masculinity that I believe is coming around, it's that our worth is what we provide. Our worth is what we do. So people that lose their jobs commit suicide at alarming rates, right? Like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I did a lot of therapy to get better about it, right? But towards the end, when my dad was sick, we all moved back in to our childhood home to take care of him. It was easy for me because I was basically traveling as a like 4 weeks out of the month. But my sister moved in with her husband, my brother-in-law, who was going through nursing school at the time. Noah, my nephew, my oldest nephew, was 3. The twins were just born. So it was in a 3-bedroom house. My mom, my dad with cancer, my
Mm.
brother-in-law, my sister, 3 kids, their 2 dogs, my dog,
Dios
and me.
santo.
It was, oh, look at that. It was pretty
What just
tight, right? But
happened there? What was that
oh,
about?
it's the iPhone thing. So I think it's turned on somehow.
That was
Oh, I
pretty
was
cool. Thank you
counting.
for
You
the
you got
special
balloons. No,
effects.
we're in Lois's lounge, man. Like we got balloons, we got
What just
lasers.
happened?
Look at that. We got everything in Lois's lounge. Right? This is
Wow.
high production.
That's
So
awesome.
so we were all living together and it was difficult, but it was cool too, right? Because it was what my dad wanted. My parents had gotten divorced and it kind of ended up getting back together, so he kind of missed us growing up together in a place. But towards the end, and another thing I'll mention, I think my dad was a very religious man. He had a lot of faith. I'm not religious. I have a lot of issues with the church and some of the things that they've done.
Okay. Okay.
But it's not that I don't believe in a God, right? I
Right,
just
right,
don't
right.
necessarily agree with some of the decisions the church has made. But my dad was super Catholic, and I believe he was like Ned Flanders, but Catholic, right? So I believe that his
Flanders.
faith got him through because they gave him 3 months to live, and he lived for 3 years and two
Mm.
and a half years without morphine. He was out there doing kettlebells and like all this stuff. He seemed okay. We were just going to chemo every 2 weeks. But towards the end, it got pretty bad. And I was out working out, and he came out to. I was doing yoga, I remember, because it was like a mobility day, and my dad came out to get some air. But it was maybe a month before he passed, because pretty soon after that, he stopped walking on his own and all that stuff. And he called me over and said, "Hey, son, I'm afraid for your immortal soul. You're doing this yoga which is not Catholic, right?" And I'm like, okay. Normally that would trigger the hell out of me. But that day I had a lot of patience. I don't know what it was, maybe seeing him so frail, or maybe because I already knew my dad and I know he didn't mean anything by it. But I'm like, no, dad, this is, I was in a car accident. Yoga is the only thing that brought my knees back so I can run marathons and all that. And also it helps me be in the moment. Like if I am not in the moment, I have a tendency to always just think about the future
Drift.
because of everything that I've described. If I'm not in the moment, I'm gonna fall on my face, right? Doing yoga, I'm gonna go straight from Warrior 3 to Faceplant. So, and then we started talking and all that. And just out of nowhere, and Carlos, I don't know if you've ever heard something you needed to hear without knowing you needed to hear it, but he said, I know I made you feel like you weren't good enough growing up, and I'm sorry. This is important because whenever I would bring it up, he would do like that two slaps, like, look how good you turned out, ha ha ha, and walk away, which would infuriate me, right? But he said, I'm sorry, and I was blown away. And he said, you were smart. I was young. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't have the language to tell you what I'm about to tell you now. You're my son. I know you. I love you. You're never going to be happy half-assing anything. That's not you. But I didn't express it well. We had a good relationship. We had a really good relationship. But if he hadn't said that that day, I would have been carrying resentment
Yeah.
to this day. He freed me from that somehow. And, you know, I've said this
Oh,
before too.
dude,
It's
no, you're not gonna make me cry on my show. How
no, no.
dare you?
I
How
mean,
dare you?
maybe. But
Dare you, sir? Be your first and last time you're on the lounge.
that's right. That's right. It's a
I'm
no
just
cry
kidding.
lounge. But no,
Oh,
my
man.
grandmother was an opera singer, an activist, um, had a nonprofit for single mothers. She was a university professor. My grandfather was a gastrointestinal surgeon. You can imagine that there was not a lot of time for the kids because these were two people that were very dedicated to their careers.
Noted.
So it was the first time, and my dad had two brothers, right? My uncles. And it was the first time I saw him as a little kid that
Mm,
needed to excel to get attention. And I saw him pass that on to me because I think, look, I don't have any kids. I have nephews, right? I have a lot of godchildren. I'm like Thanos with Infinity Stones with god kids. I have a lot. I'll send you a
no.
picture a friend made of that. Um, and my good friends have kids and I'm very involved with them,
Yeah.
but I don't have any children, right?
No, I understand. I understand.
But I think that we're going to fuck up our kids no matter
Mm,
what, but we're going to protect them from the way that our parents messed us up, right? I think the important thing is to know that they love us and that the kids know we love them. We might not be perfect. None of us are. We we might be overdramatic. We might be emotionally detached, but as long as they know that we recognize these things and that they are loved, I think we can surpass a lot of that. So it was like I've said it before. I felt like I wanted to give my dad a hug, like a little kid. Like it's the first time I saw him as a little kid,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And it was this person who for a long time I resented for making me feel like I wasn't good enough. But then I
Mm.
allowed that to happen too. Like I have agency in this too, right? So,
I can totally empathize and also understand what you're saying because for me, I recently had an aha. Well, several years ago, I've kind of had a similar aha moment with my own father, who is, he'll be 74 in a couple of weeks, God willing. Old
mm.
school, Puerto Rican. He's a Leo on top of that. Uh,
My dad was
uh,
a Leo.
My yeah, okay, so there you go. He's a Leo. My mom's a Taurus. I'm a Taurus. Geez Louise. It's like World War Three, four, and five. No, but one of the things that my father told me, and I remember this was summer 2016, maybe 17, is he was like, whenever you cry, and I'm always hard on you, I always tell you, don't cry. He's like, I grew up differently than you. My parents weren't affectionate the way we are with you. I didn't have even a quarter of what you have. So he's like, I'm just cut from a different cloth. It's not that I don't want you to feel your feelings, but that crying thing, But I remember I was crying over something. Don't ask me about what, but I got the hug afterwards. Cut to earlier this year. I remember telling Harry about this, and we talked about this in the previous episode. There's nothing better than hearing my father just randomly call me and say, Hey, I just miss your voice. I just want to tell you I love you and I'm proud of you. Gets me every time I hang up, and I'm like,
Yeah, dude, I
you
get it.
know. But
I
if you
get it.
have good parents like we do, and I believe that I always say your mom is the closest thing to God. But if you have a wonderful father like we do, um, to me, that type of love is the closest thing to God. So I can totally understand what you're saying, and I think that's hearing you saying that. Like I don't know, I almost started bawling. I dropped a
Yeah,
few tears. I'm
man. Like
sorry, bro,
it's
but I
oh,
can
brother,
totally
it's like
understand that feeling, and it's just like el amor del padre y la madre is there's nothing like it. There's
yeah,
nothing like it.
you're probably watching a Pixar movie or something, and then dad noticed and he gave you that hug. But like, and then there's mom, right? Like mom,
Oh,
like I'm nothing
yeah,
without my mom. I'm nothing without my mom. Like that lady's made of steel, right? It's amazing how they can be so soft and yet made of steel. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But from her, I learned that strength for others, right? Like
Mm,
a life of service, a life like, and also not to lose, like the lesson I also learned from her, which I wish she would learn, is not to lose yourself in that. You have to be able to take care of yourself, to take care of others. You can't deplete your tank, right? And that's a great lesson I learned from my mom. And, I'm very lucky to have the parents that I have. And I'll give you a little Easter egg. So you see the cover of Still, right? That you
yes.
held it. I'm gonna shoot you a hip hop. I'm gonna shoot you a hip hop Easter egg. So aside from the fact that that's the picture that immigrants and families took at Sears in 1991, right? Look at that background and everything.
That was my first job, by the way, Sears Portrait Studio.
Okay, so you know it. You
Oh,
recognize it, right? It's either Woolworths or Sears or
I think
something.
I took this picture. No, I'm joking.
Oh, there you go. It was like little 4-year-old Lois was out there like cheese. But yeah. The reason that I chose that as the cover image was I think we all have moments and images and pictures that define a before and after, a threshold space, a milestone, right? Like a
Gotcha.
Polaroid, a
Gotcha.
moment in time. There was life before that picture, Peru, and there was life after that picture, United
Mm.
States. The other reason I picked that cover is I'm a huge Kendrick Lamar fan. So
Yay.
just like his album covers, bam.
That come on now. Come on now. So you're on Team Kendrick, not Team Drake right now. It's been
It's
the it's been the
so I
hip hop
can't say
battle.
that because at some point it was just like he was just punching out a little Canadian boy. Like I went into this with my sister, right? Like look, I respect what Drake has done, his skill. Like I'm not here to
Sure.
tear anybody down, right?
Sure.
But I don't think that Drake is at the level yet to make Kendrick better, right? Like I always thought, ooh, what if Kendrick and Eminem got into it? But somebody might die. So I don't want that, right? Like that would I think would be a legit
That's
thing.
a
But I
different type
always
of
love
beef.
artists and maybe not in terms of a rivalry or a feud, but in terms of collaboration or like
Absolutely.
having that healthy competition.
Yeah.
I would love to see Kendrick go up against someone that would make him even better than he is because we can always grow.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Drake or any of the people on your audience who think it was just the evidence is there. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put out one right now, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be I'm gonna have the most Toronto Raptor that ever raptured in the video, dancing to the song about it's just, oh my
It's
God.
crazy.
Oh my God. But anyway,
I want to take a quick break to pay some bills here. So, just really quickly, everybody, please don't forget to use my code Los Lounge Pod Trial. That's LOSLOUNGEPOD Trial, and get your free 3 sample pack over at magicmind.com. That's magicmind.com/ Los Lounge Pod Trial. Magic Mind, the world's first mental performance shot, carefully crafted, 10 plus years with the help of many scientists and their advisory board. Magic Mind is the potent elixir infused with clinically studied ingredients that not only have been helping me as of late, I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome. It can also help you in your daily mental performance, also with stress and ease. Magicmind.com. Take advantage now, and you can get your free 3 sample pack, magicmind.com/ Los Lounge Pod Trial. That's Los Lounge Pod Trial as the code. Big shout out to Magic Mind. And you can also check out more information on my Instagram at Los Lounge_podcast. Hey, don't forget to also go follow Renzo as well, as we continue on with our discussion here. But don't forget to follow as well my friends over at Magic Mind. That's Los Lounge Pod Trial, and you'll get 3 free sample pack. Magicmind.com / Los Lounge Pod Trial. And we continue. So let's get on with oh, one more thing. Actually, you know what? I'm going to no, let me ask this. Vulnerability, because poetry is also about vulnerability. And I believe that vulnerability is a huge sign of courage and strength. Would you agree with that statement?
1,000%. I think it's my greatest strength to be able to ask for help.
Mm,
Community,
mm,
building community. Vulnerability
mm.
is, I think, you heard me mention it this way again. And again, I admire somebody like Ayn Rand in terms of the work output, but that, and I saw her shift from it later in life, but that whole Atlas shrug, like the individual is greater. You saw Gladiator? I know you
Oh,
saw
yes.
Gladiator.
Yeah,
All
20,
right.
23
So
or
that
yeah,
movie is
24
about
years.
the
Yeah,
good of the few versus the good of the many,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is it does is like is a man's life worth Rome? Sort of
Mm,
deal. That was the question, right?
yeah,
And it's a hard question, right? But
yeah.
I think that I'll put it this way. When I fought for myself, I've been strong. When I fought for my family, I've been invincible. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
When I fought for the people I love, I just don't I figure out a way.
Kind of goes
I
back
try
to
different
when
roads.
you said going from the gunslinger to the sheriff, because when you were the gunslinger, you said it's like you would be in and out, get your money and be out. Now that I'm
Oh,
the
when I was a
sheriff, I'm
consultant. Yeah,
taking
yeah,
care
yeah,
of
yeah.
everybody. I've did my research on you, young man.
I know, I know, I know you
Um,
did.
I
I
want to
feel it.
read this if it's okay with you. Because Kurt, who is one of your best friends, I called him Kirk earlier, but it's Kurt. Uh,
Kurt.
he,
Curtis.
I highlighted this specific paragraph because I think it really embodies. Well, let me just read it to you. Still, like the layered grounds on which it lives, it's strong and deep. Family is the deepest ground, the foundation that allows a life to soar, and soar it does. And that is what makes this collection so worthwhile. When poetry and and life are deserving of one another, readers are given permission to travel into that life, expanding and enriching their own lives by the light of the now revealed truth. And I thought that was very important because that really summarizes what this book is and just everything you're kind of about. One of the poems that I highlighted, and just flipping through my page, and I'm going to
Hmm.
start right here. Beginnings, and it's the first poem. All right. So I'm like, I open the book. What's Renzo about? I'm ready. But this poem had me sit right up, and I said, well, I say, God damn, hold up. There's a lucky lady in his life, and she's making him feel a certain type of way. Um, I I'm assuming that's for your lovely lady.
So it's at the beginning. So this poetry book is actually chronological order. This was something I was exploring back in college or high
Am I
school or
way
something.
off? You can just say I'm way off.
No, well,
No.
this is the thing. This is the thing, right? You're not way off because the person who's feeling these feelings, I think that we might evolve, but our core remains the same. So the way that we process things remains pretty similar, I think, throughout our lifetime, right? So the way that I would process my current relationship would be in a very similar way. So maybe.
Well, listen. I mean, when by the time we got to "I taste her lips, the flavor rests briefly on my tongue," I was like, "Well, damn it, man. Here we go. Here we go. Come on now, Renzo. Talk that talk." In all
Horny
seriousness,
teenager.
in all seriousness, and it's actually kind of funny and ironic at the same time because, well, it's to me it's ironic because you mentioned or you spoke about this poem in another show. um I didn't want to really repeat what you've done, but damn it, if I don't do it, I'm going to be mad because Brothers was one of
Please.
the ones that stuck out to me, and I am the youngest of five. I'm my mom's only child. um
Okay.
so to me, my younger brother, if I had one, would be Harry, who is my best friend and also the other
Right.
co-host. Just quick background on Harry. Shout out to Harry. He's alpha black male, the smartest person I know, highly educated. He's an artist. He's a father. He's a husband. And I'm the gay best friend, right? So I've introduced him to this whole like other culture and whatnot. And for the last 15 years, I've been better because of Harry. I will say that. So when I'm reading this, I think about Harry, but then I heard you read it. And I kid you not, las lágrimas se me salieron because it's one
Wow.
thing to read it to yourself, But when you hear it and then you kind of close your eyes, I think about my brother, and I love my brother. My brother taught me about grace, and forgiveness. And I love the message about brothers. Please tell everyone what brothers is about, and if you could just speak
Sure.
more on it.
So there's
And if I shed a tear, don't judge me.
nah, dude, I like I said, you don't want to watch Up with me. First 15 minutes of Up, I'll be like, oh, that's what I want in life.
Wait, what's up? I don't know what that is.
Up, what's up? No, it's Up from
What's
Pixar. The
Oh, okay.
movie, the Pixar movie where like it's the old man who's in the house with the balloons, and the first 15 minutes shows his
I don't
life
know.
like love story, and it
Ah,
just
okay,
ends
okay,
there.
okay.
And I was just like, I can't. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
All right, cool.
So Brothers
Brothers,
was
yes.
actually a collaboration. It was my first collaboration in a long time. And it happened with Andy Diaz, who is known as Adding Passion here in Miami. He's young poet, really, inspired by like slam poetry and like the New York scene somehow got to
Mm,
him here, like that 80s to 90s New York poetry scene.
hmm.
And I definitely see the influence there. And we hit it off. But he's at that time, he must have been like 23, 24. I'm 40. But I definitely saw a lot of this existential looking for truth. I recognized it. And we hit it off. We became good friends. So it was interesting there's another half to this poem that is
I heard you.
his.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a Deadpool Wolverine friendship locket right now,
Got you.
right?
Got you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you can put it together for a performance, but this is my side that also flows as it would be one poem, but it's enhanced definitely when Andy does his part.
Right.
And he came over one time. He's like, we should collaborate, and it just grew. I started talking about experience. He gave his responses. Somebody think about, like you said, you're the little brother, and also even with Harry, you're the little brother, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So think about the times your big brothers try to give you wisdom and you're like, okay, but maybe like, oh, I know better or this and that or whatever. And it just became this, like I said, this sort of puzzle piece, friendship locket, but also
Got you.
it was like me talking to myself as if I
Got you.
was younger. It's also, um, there's a little bit of like a criticism of societal constraints as well. Um, don't want to get too political. There's a lot of stuff that informs this, but it's funny because the first time it was published, it was as I was doing this, my publisher had an anthology, a self-care thing, and she thought it'd be great for it. And when I've performed it in open mics, I've been lucky enough to do it twice with Andy, but when I performed this one alone in open mics, people just come up to me and a number of people have come out to me about this one in particular and just like, oh, like it made me think of my friend who passed away, or like I got to go talk to my brother, or my dad is always trying to say something to me. And even sometimes like my sister, right? It does like gender is not really a thing that matters. It's just like this person that holds this space in my heart with this knowledge, trying to pass it on in this conversation, in this dialogue of live your life.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter who laughed at you in middle school. Who gives a fuck? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. You don't even know what their story is or why they laughed, right? Like don't just move on and be exclusively and truthfully you.
I want to remind everybody where you can get the book still. At your local bookstore, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. He is an award-winning author. Two of the poems that stood out for me, one is Magdalena. I liked Magdalena a lot.
Thank you.
And uh, uh, oh, I wanted to impress you, my friend here. To-do list. To-do list.
To-do
There's
list.
one line in to-do list, and I highlight it, and now I have to find it. But I thought that was very important, and it resonated. And when you guys buy the book, it's on page 78, to-do list. But you end with forgive myself.
Yeah.
Right? And we always talk about, sometimes even here at work, is how we always are so quick to have compassion for others and empathy for others, but we forget to take time to have compassion for ourselves. What's your thoughts around that?
Sure. So I'll give you the context. So this one was when I wrote in French first, and I think it's Liste faire, and I think it's on page 80. So
Get the following. Yep.
yeah. So the reason that I did that was so when I was dating my ex who was French, like I said, I didn't know the language, but I think I always wanted to understand her in her language. It's one of the reasons I also dove deeper into French. Because there's something to understanding somebody unfiltered. Now, a relationship didn't work out for a variety of reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but when I wrote this, I wanted to keep the promise I made to her, even though I never told her. I'd made it to
Mm.
myself, and I wanted to keep that promise. So I also cheated because a to-do list, I can be really not accurate with my grammar because it's a to-do list. It's not like these structured sentences, so it's easier for me to write. So I wrote it out in French. Then I translated it to English. Please don't make I can read it for you. Please don't make me read the French one because my pronunciation without
It
practice
would
is
be
horrible.
incredible if you would actually. Would you mind?
Yeah. So no, I would not mind at all. I'm happy to read it for you. But the purpose of this is I wanted to take this thing, this sometimes we take people for granted. Sometimes we treat relationships like a checklist of things to do. But it's also a to-do list as part of our everyday life. What are we going to do? What are we getting at the store, right? Like, what are we doing there? And the purpose of this poem was I don't talk to her at all. I'm still friends we have common friends and all that, but that communication was cut. But maybe I wrote this like a message in a bottle, that if it finds its way to her one day, she knows that I don't hold any resentment. I don't hold any ill will, and that the relationship that we had, I treasure the good moments and the bad because it's made me who I am today, which I hope is a better partner to the women that came after her, and more specifically to my girlfriend now. I hope I'm the partner that she deserves.
Mm.
And despite the fact that that was another relationship, it is directly responsible for who I am today. So that's not something, look, I'm not stupid enough to be talking about relationships all the time, but who I became in that relationship, how I evolved as a person, I'm grateful for because it's somebody that connected with my current girlfriend. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'll do to-do list. Make love in French and sing in Spanish. Eat tortilla de papa in Buenos Aires. Run 5 blocks to your car to beat the rain. Temper your temper with a smile. Rest my head on your lap while you read on the futon. Count our macros while drinking white wine. Stay at that treehouse Airbnb you keep bringing up. Kiss all of your tattoos, starting at the wrist. Go geocaching to get lost. Build a fort out of pillows and your mother's duvet. Drink Negronis by the Mediterranean.
Mm.
Breathe in your laughter. Take blurry selfies while you make that face. Survive dinner with your aunt. Wrap Christmas gifts with parcel paper and red yarn. Argue less to listen more. Have a picnic by Lake Zurich. Compare stories from our childhoods. Ride bikes along the Loire and visit castles. Trace constellations using the freckles on your skin. Dash through Madrilenian crosswalks. Lay on the beach wearing matching sunglasses. Choose our daughters' names. Play my guitar while you play with my hair. Travel back in time to that afternoon in Montmartre. Pick up the laundry. Visit my tailor and choose the right tweed swatch. Listen to Nina Simone vinyls. Watch Before Sunset on your laptop before it breaks down. Pick up a carton of almond milk. Stop blaming you for our problems.
Mm.
Wake up late and then stay in bed anyway. Plant a garden of lavender and grapes. Live 1,000 lifetimes. Find you in each one. Forgive myself.
Very descriptive. Very, very descriptive. It's easy to see. It's easy to get that feeling. I mean, oh man, damn it. Damn it, man. Still is the book, ladies and gentlemen. Damn it, man. How do you follow that up? Hey, my friend, how are you on time right now?
I'm good. I
You're
cleared
okay.
my afternoon. I
I have
cleared
a
my
few.
afternoon for you.
Oh, I appreciate you so much. God bless you. Um, I want to segue off of still really quickly because I heard you mention Dublin. You went to Dublin,
I
Ireland,
did
correct?
last year. Last year in October-ish.
Okay. The only reason why I wanted to focus on that is just because my cousin's ex-husband is from Dublin, and my cousin has traveled there, and it's the landscape is incredible. The geography is incredible. I've heard so many wonderful things about the people. Can you tell me about your experience in Dublin?
Yeah, everybody has a dope hat like you in Dublin, just like that.
Nice.
Um, so Dublin is interesting because Inigo was there with his girlfriend, who's a good friend of mine too, Almudena, Almu. And she was working there. She's an environmental engineer, and he's a photographer, so he was staying with her. They were there for 3 months. So when I went to Europe, they're like, "Come stay in Dublin." So I stayed for a week. And what I loved about Dublin, it's that it's a city known as a literary hub. James
Okay.
Joyce came from there. Oscar Wilde came from there.
Yeah.
Seamus Heaney, Samuel Beckett, like all of these varied writers that are incredibly respected. And as I was walking those streets, like it's definitely an inspiration to go there,
Mm,
right? And there's the touristy part where there are a bunch of drunk Brits in the middle of it, right? But then like the Dubliners actually hang out. I actually became really good friends with my Airbnb hosts, who are now just
nice. Oh, wow.
friends. And she's from Venezuela, but he's a Dubliner, born and bred, right? So he
Oh,
told me where to go to get like an authentic experience. And there's just walking around Dublin, and I've said this about different cities like Lisbon too. But it whispers its secret poetry in your ear. Every time you turn a corner, there's places that you don't
mm,
expect, art that you don't expect, murals, people having conversations. We had to get out of the rain, and we just stepped into a store. It happened to be a vinyl shop, half the size of my office, and we made friends with the guy, and he gifted me like a Diamonds Are Forever 1973 book copy, and there
oh
was like
no.
a like this Dubliners vinyl that I bought to support it, and I always like shouted out the vinyl store whenever we're there, and it was just that sense of community that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
Dublin has a lot of history. You can feel the suffering that the Irish people have gone through over the centuries
Mm,
in the city because it's part of who they are. But it's also a testament to their resilience and their hospitality and the way they welcome you. I felt extremely welcomed in Dublin because they're all immigrants. There's there's I think there's more Irish outside of Ireland than there are in Ireland,
in
right?
Ireland.
Or
Okay.
pretty close because they've had to immigrate from the potato famine to the Civil War that they had and all of that stuff. So there's a great, I think hospitality is part of their cultural makeup, and it shows in their literature, and it shows in how they treat you to a pint.
One thing, one word that is very constant in our conversation and is community, the sense of community. And we can build our own communities, whether it's family or friends, colleagues, what have you, or via our interest. As you know, you're a poet. I'm sure you've met so many people at open mics, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you also have your own personal sense of community and what have you. One of the things I wanted to ask you was when there have you faced any not pushback, but have you ever faced any within your own community? Have you faced challenges? Um,
Huh. Yeah, brother. I have, right? So one of the so I grew up in Miami, so I didn't really experience a lot of racism growing up.
okay.
But then when I went to college, which was in Gainesville, which was still pretty okay. But then when I was a consultant, and I would travel, I remember I traveled to was North South? No, it was North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham. I had an assignment in Raleigh, Durham.
Mm,
And some guy told me to, in Starbucks, told me to go back where I came from, you know?
mm,
And, but the thing is, I grew up in Miami and I have a bit of a temper when like, it was before I had the empathy that I had now. So I was like, where the suite of the hotel you can never afford. And then, like, my colleague, this is important, who was black, pulled me aside and said, like, it's not worth it.
mm,
And kind of explained to me what he had to deal with all the time going around. And it's like, you can still go home. This person has, and at the end of the day, now I have more compassion because, like, what in their life made them reach out to me that way, you know? At a just getting a tea at a Starbucks.
mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And that that informed me, but I do have to just clearly state that because I lived in a place like Miami and from the 90s, right? Not Miami now. I think it's a bit more complicated
completely
now.
different city, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was just kind of grew up like the Wonder Years. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
it was this I have this nostalgia where I wasn't really made to feel like the other the way that I was later. Now. And because of that, I developed a strong sense of self, right? Like what I meant about South America, that weak civil society where you can sway this way or that way. Well,
right.
in a micro, from a micro perspective, like I was able to develop a strong sense of self for like 18 years. So when I'm faced with that, I'm able to handle it without anger, right? Although not perfectly, not always, right? But
We never
now
get it
as we
right.
go,
It's about
yeah, yeah, yeah.
trying and making the
But
effort.
I'm much better about it now at 40 than I was at 27,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but Miami, in the sense of community, to go back to it, Dublin is an inspiration for that because Miami is known for being young, maybe a little superficial, maybe a little materialistic, right? It's the place where people vacation, but all of the big ticket items that are affecting us as a country are happening now. Immigration reform, female reproductive rights,
Yeah,
um, uh, climate legislation, Medicaid, Medicare fraud, like
yes,
all of this is all happening here, right? And there's a lot of voices of people that have so much to say about the subject. So why not us? Why Dublin and not us? Right? We are a center for Latin American and Caribbean migrations, much like New York, right? And not just or the Northeast, not just that, but like the whole world.
mhm.
Everybody passes through Miami or Atlanta, which is pretty close by. That airport's the busiest one in the world, right? Um, so I think it's important to create a community where we can document that because hell, whenever you had a fascist regime come in, like Franco in Spain, the first people they kill are the poets, right? Poets used to be delegates, used to be ambassadors, artists too. And
Yeah,
it's because they can help people challenge preconceptions.
right.
So I think it's incredibly important to create community, incredibly important to make, let's say I develop a platform. Can I use it to help somebody who's underrepresented show their voice? I think I have a duty to do that because
Absolutely.
you're doing it for me right now. I don't know your audience. I don't know them, and you're helping me spread whatever I've got to say to them. I need to push that, pay that forward. I need to be able to do that for other people, you know, because that creates a more complete picture of who we are.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. One of the things that you and I have in common is, and I'm even though it's on different levels or what have you, or it might not be, but is working in healthcare, and our passion for it. Right now, what I love doing, and I'm happy to be in this role as a community health worker. I work with kids who are affected with lead poison. I'm actually doing this from my office at work now, and supportive team. I mean, they embrace my creative side. They've allowed me to create a podcast for lead poison awareness as well. So a big shout out to everyone here at Square One. But prior to that, I was an assistant program director for a adult day health services uh, company, and I worked in health centers before. But I say all that to say is that that previous role, I was again assistant program director. And one of the big things that I learned that I took away from working there for almost 5 years is that a manager or supervisor is just a title. A leader will always have the people, and you do a lot of leadership work. You do a lot of community work and whatnot in healthcare. Uh, who who are your in that field, in that respect, who are the people that you look up to or that inspire you? Number
Oh my
one.
God.
And what inequities are you seeing in healthcare?
So it's complex, but the first person that comes to mind is my former boss, Dan Harden. He was my boss for 8 years before my company got acquired by one of the big healthcare firms. And I was a consultant. He had just taken over that business as the GM, senior vice president, and he reached out. He did the right way. He reached out to my boss at that time, Ben Heck, who's also a great guy, and said, "Hey, Renzo, we want Renzo to come in and run our PMO. Are you okay with me reaching out to him?" He's like, "Hey, it's an opportunity to go." And this is where you heard the gunslinger stuff. I rejected him 3 times. We
Yeah.
always call it like the Jesus rejection because we always say I rejected him 3 times before the cock crowed. But the reason was I was so focused back then. I hadn't reached that point of enlightenment that we talked about. I was just safety and money and doing all that stuff. And I was a gunslinger. I was a consultant. I'd go into town, grab
Yeah.
my money, right off.
Yeah.
He was asking me to be a sheriff, right? He was asking me to
Mm,
stay and make sure that there was no damage, that people could live in the town, that everything was okay. And he eventually convinced me. But the reason that he's on that Mount Rushmore of people in healthcare is that he genuinely cares about making things better for the underserved populations that we do, like the Medi-Medis and people that are, have Medicaid pharmacy reimbursements that they need and all that stuff.
yes.
Like he
Yes.
genuinely cares about that. Because I've worked for other people that don't, and you can tell,
Oh,
right?
okay.
But the thing that he did for me was when my dad was sick, I was about, I asked him if I could take a sabbatical, and the company didn't do sabbaticals, right? Other big
Yeah.
companies like Intel and others do sabbaticals on a regular basis. Um, but they didn't. So I was going to resign because I wanted to be close to my dad. And he said, if you can perform, and remember, I told you I was flying out like 3 to 4 weeks out of the month. So I couldn't keep that up. So he said, if you manage to perform after a couple of months the way you're performing now, you don't have to travel anymore. And he changed, and I'm like, well, what if your boss doesn't like? He's like, I'll handle that. You're my guy, right? So I'll handle that. And he gave me 3 years with my father.
Mm,
I can never repay that. Plus, he's super knowledgeable about it, right? He understands the policy. He's a good guy and all that stuff. But like
God bless him,
that
bro.
showed me the type of leader that I aspire to be. Because when I came in there, look, I was a great resource, but much like my dad being a fighter pilot, I had a lot of ego. You don't call a consultant if things are good. You're calling us if things are bad. But I came in to that job and I took 2 weeks and came up with a plan to restructure the entire project management office. You had people that were project managing on Microsoft Project, others on Word, others on Excel, others on notebooks, just like pen and paper. So
Mhm.
it's very difficult to streamline and create efficiencies there, right? So I came in and in 2 weeks I had it fixed. Huge failure, Carlos, huge failure. What mistake did I make? I didn't include them. I
Mm,
was an individual contributor that was brought in to be a people leader, and I was acting like an individual contributor. I didn't take time to understand what their problems were.
their needs were.
I was saying, like, why are you doing this in paper versus why are you doing this in paper?
Yeah.
What's the benefit? What's the issue? Do we have somebody that's in a role that's too ashamed to say they don't know how to use a program? Can I teach them, right? Vulnerability, right? I wasn't creating space for that. So when I realized what I had done, I called HR to have somebody present so that they felt safe. I gathered them all up in a virtual room. Um, and I said, I'm sorry. I came in here with a solution. I didn't ask you about it. That was my mistake. You guys have been here longer than me. You understand this more than I do. Here are the parameters I need to reach. How do we reach them? It took 9 months and they created 90% of what I had done already. But the
Mm,
10% that they had made in terms of processes and best practices and all that was better than anything I had ever thought of. That taught me that if I'm going to be a leader, I need to listen because my
listen.
job is no longer to do. Because no matter how good I was, and I was good,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
do 100% of that. But as a good leader, I can do 2,000%, 3,000%, 4,000%,
Yeah.
right? And my job has become to enable others to do. And that's when my life changed in terms of that. That's when I
Wow.
realized the impact I could have because I could do this or I can be part of a community that does this.
Right, right, right. Wow.
So,
Wow. Healthcare, health, healthcare and poetry go right hand in hand.
but they
Actually,
do
you know
like,
what they do though, if you think about it. And here's how I want to tie this up with you spoke about death in the book and why it's important for humans not to be immortal. Obviously, we would run out of resources and what
yeah,
have you,
I
and
know what poem
whatnot.
you're talking about. Yeah.
So, or was it in it was
It's one that's called the narrative poem. It's a long form poem, and the reason I wrote that one was I wanted to eulogy. It was called eulogy,
thank you,
and
sir.
the reason that I wrote it that way is I wanted to take the perspective of somebody hyper rationalizing emotions
Yeah,
and make it seem like, and also like if you look at it, I'm misusing words, right? But
yeah.
like trying to sound smarter than I am than the poet, like the speaker is trying to sound smarter than they are because they're trying to deal with emotions by hyper intellectualizing it.
Mm,
And at the end of the day, emotions are emotions and they go
yeah,
hand in hand, but one can't, they, again, they're not this. They work together. Your intellect and your emotions work together to get a
yeah.
connection, to get an outcome, to get a life.
Understand, noted and noted. And just to conclude that last point, healthcare, life, death, there is poetry between that, at least I think it's all poetic. Life
There's
is poetic. I, I don't know, I just think we're all art in motion. Some of us are tapped into that side more than others, especially more creatives like you and I. We're tapped into that, or Harry as well. Big up to Harry. um One of the creative sides, playing guitar and singing. We talked about playing guitar earlier. uh What's your favorite song to play on guitar?
Oh God. Because I don't have a pop voice, I have a Broadway voice,
Don't worry,
right?
I'm not
So
gonna have you play
it's
song and dance
different. It's
right now.
different. It's different. But
We won't put you on the
I'll do it,
spot.
man. Vulnerability. No. So one of my favorite songs to play on guitar, because it's the first song I learned that my roommate from college, Josh, taught me.
Gotcha.
Shout out to Josh. Ho
Yeah.
Suave. Um, he taught me Baby Take Off Your Cool by Nora Jones and Outkast because it's three chords.
Yeah.
So it's just like dun 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 dun, and that taught me the repetition and the finger position because it's not
Wait a
just like
minute.
C
Hold on.
or
Put a
E.
pause on that, my brother. What album is this? Not her
That
first
is
album, right?
the what's the name of their album? That's two of them. The Love Below, I
Oh, The
think.
Love Below and Speaker Box.
Yes, but I think it's on the Love Below. Let me just
Okay,
confirm.
I'm just gonna write this down. Outcast. And again, my sincerest apologies for interrupting, but you're putting me onto something new here. Hold on. I don't think I heard that. Nora Jones is an incredible, incomparable
He's fantastic.
talent.
I
Yeah.
think I think it's on the Love Below.
Okay. No, listen, I'll Google it.
I'll
Got
be
it.
right there.
Noted and noted. Damn.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt your.
It's just three easy chords, but then like the first half of that is just like, like Andre like just like falsettoing over it. And
Yeah.
then you start like picking the chords like dun 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 dun, but it's the same chords.
Gotcha.
So that's one of my favorite songs to play. And then I also love like an acoustic arrangement of To Love Somebody by the Bee Gees before they became all
Mm,
disco, which I love anything. The Bee Gees are great, but it's just like a really nice flowing thing. So those are Nora Jones and Outkast or the Bee Gees. I don't know. Like those are two songs that I really, really enjoy playing.
variety is the spice of life.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but it would be completely remiss of me if I didn't. Actually, I'd be very disappointed in myself if I didn't add these fun and frivolous questions because we
Hit me up.
talk the
Let's have
talk, but
fun.
are you ready? Michael Jackson or Prince?
Prince.
Oh, ooh, Prince. That was quick.
Okay, so I grew up with Michael Jackson and I like his music more, but as an artist and what he represented and what he stood
Say it.
for and the fact he didn't give a fuck, the purple one.
Say it. Caso cerrado.
Yeah. Nothing
Janet
against Michael.
Jackson or Madonna? Don't feel pressure because you see her in the background. I'm
No,
obsessed with
but
both.
I've listened more to Madonna, but I like later now in life I'm like listening more to Janet. Because
Gotcha.
I don't know, Madonna's annoying me recently, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry, dude. That's
Say you're
not the Madonna
sorry.
we're getting now. That's not the Madonna that we're getting now. Okay. But in terms of as an art, they're both, maybe I have to go Madonna because I think she was more revolutionary in what she did and the time period she did. And
Nah.
like Holiday does will always get a play if it
Yeah.
comes out
Yeah.
on my thing. But you're giving me hard questions. Nothing against Janet. Janet's fantastic, but
Janet's
I think
incredible.
Madonna.
TLC or Destiny's Child?
TLC. TLC.
Ah,
TLC. Crazy Sexy Cool was a definitive album for me. Yeah.
man, take me back to the 90s. Now, you in the 90s, Miami, the Versace era.
There.
Oh
Yes.
my
Who he was.
God. You know what? We're gonna have to bring you back on, and we'll have to get on that. Mariah Carey, Mary J. Blige.
Mariah Carey. I'll tell you why. Well, I don't think I would enjoy being her friend, but I think she's fantastic. Her range is awesome. I think I'd enjoy Mary more, but when we first came here, he did the Columbia House CDs.
Oh my God, do you
So for a
remember?
penny,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
for a
yeah,
penny, right? So I remember I got Bryan Adams, So Far So Good, because I just picked the one with the car wheel, and I
yeah.
love Bryan Adams. But my sister got Mariah Carey Music Box,
Yeah. Oh
and
man,
that
listen.
played all over. And just like I think people, I think again, we see who she is now as an icon, but we forget who she is as an artist and what she did with her voice, with the arrangement she was presented.
Hmm.
That shit was revolutionary too.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
Mary J. Blige is awesome. I'm going Mariah Carey.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, 80s or 90s?
I listen to more 80s for sure.
Jay-Z or Nas?
Nas.
Tribe Called Quest or the Wu-Tang Clan?
I don't want your listeners to think I'm a hypocrite, but Tribe Called Quest. Tribe
Harry,
Called
you'd be
Quest.
so proud of
Because
that.
I thought of Wu-Tang first and I love Wu-Tang, but I've listened to Tribe Called Quest more and more and more.
Sidebar, if you haven't heard the album yet, The Renaissance by Q-Tip came out in 2008. It's called The Renaissance. Definitely check that album out.
Okay, I
An
will.
incredible body of work. We always end the show with a one-word association game.
Okay.
So I usually ask Harry to hit me with three, and I'll hit him with three. I'm going to give you five. You just give me the first thing that comes off the top of your head when you hear the word. And before we do that, please tell everybody where can they find the book once again, and also your social media.
Sure. So it's my name. I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes because it tends
Absolutely.
to have like 23 letters, I think, last time I checked, or something like that. So it's renzodelcastillo.com is the website, which is getting renovated. I'm on Instagram and TikTok as renzodelcastillo.author. I'm on LinkedIn for those who want to
Yeah.
see what my day job is, under Renzo del Castillo, my name. I'm on renzodelcastillo.author, I think, on Facebook as well. Um, and I'm sure I'm in other things. The uh the book is available wherever books are sold. Barnes and Nobles definitely has it. Amazon definitely has it. Again, it's available in hardcover because I really wanted people to have the tactile experience of having a
I
hardcover book.
appreciate that. I wanted to say thank you for
Yeah.
that.
All right. I have a paperback because Inigo says it in his intro in Spanish. Renzo should be read in the lobby of a hotel, right? So that means like I want you to travel. Like I want people who pick this up to go have experiences to travel. So paperback is easier to do that. The audiobook, if you guys liked my voice, I read all the poems in it, even the French one, which took me a while because again, I haven't been to France in a couple of years, so I'm out of practice. And I have the Kindle, which again, and I thank you for allowing me to stress this, it is 99 cents only because I can't make it free. Art should be inclusive. If you want to pick up my book and you're struggling right now for whatever reason, it's 99 cents. I'm trying to do the best I can to make sure it's in your hands.
Look, for $2, you can get his book and you can get an Arizona iced tea. They don't up the price on that either. It's 99 cents. So you can
That's the
sit, and they're not
synergy.
even promoting this, like they're not sponsoring. I do want to remind
That's the sponsor I needed to talk to. You know what I mean?
I do want to remind everybody, please use my code Los Lounge Pod Trial. That's LOSLOUNGEPOD Trial at magicmind.com. And you can get your free 3 sample packs. So a big thank you to everyone at Magic Mind. Renzo, before I forget, thank you. I'm in awe. I'm blown away. I'm inspired. Please let's stay connected.
Of course.
If you're ever down to come back to the lounge, just throw me a
Always, man.
DM.
I
There's
would
so
love
much more to talk about. I
the way
feel
you talked about Harry. I feel like I gotta meet him,
you
you
have
know?
to. And you know what? A big shout out to Jasmine, the first lady
Her
of the lounge,
too.
and Harry.
Yeah.
Uh, Renzo Del Castillo. First word, freedom,
Love.
creation.
Necessary.
Ooh, Peru.
Ceviche.
When was the last time you went to Peru?
The last time I went to Peru was when my little cousin died. Um
Oh,
uh it was over 8 years ago.
got you.
Um but I still ate. So, you know,
Yeah,
funerals have good food there too.
come
No,
on.
he appreciated it because he loved food.
Oh
Renato loved
man.
food. And you'd have liked him. He was funny. He was super
Listo.
funny, super kind. Yeah.
All right. America. Actually,
Home.
let me take that. Allow me to take that back. Let me start that again. Not let me. Let me got his neck broke. Let me start that again. United
Let
States of America.
God.
I know that's more
Home.
than one
I
word.
want. I mean, I have more than one. I guess work in progress, but
You know what?
home,
I'll take it.
fixer upper, right? But it's home. It's home.
That's perfect. And final word, still.
Family.
I love it. Which, by the way, still is also a good song by Jennifer Lopez. I'm just saying she's not the best vocalist, but it's a damn good song. Check that
I
out.
haven't heard it. I haven't heard it.
Oh,
I'm
it's
not.
it's
I'm not
it's
a.
during the original Ben Affleck era.
Okay. Okay. You know what? For you, Carlos, for you, I'm gonna listen to it.
I appreciate you, my brother. Hey, everybody, still is the book. Renzo Del Castillo is the man. I am Carlos Reyes, otherwise known. Madonna is the girl behind me. Uh, but
I chose
she,
her.
you did, and but she's not
Wait,
sponsoring this episode.
you got Basquiat too. I got to talk
Um,
to you after.
please, yes. Well, it's not the real deal, but
No, but still, yeah,
it's yeah.
still,
Well, he's from Brooklyn, which is where I'm from,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
he's half Puerto Rican. Renzo's coming back to the podcast. Believe me, you. I want to thank all of the listeners. I have to give a big shout out. First of all, God bless you and your family. A big shout out to Kurt. Who's your other friend again? I'm sorry.
Inigo. Like,
How
my
do you
name
say
is
that
Inigo
again?
Montoya. You
Íñigo
killed my father, prepare to die,
Montoya.
like that. But his name is Inigo, de
Oye,
Amezcua.
y antes que terminamos, really
¿Qué
quickly, I'm
pasó?
sorry. The WWF belt. I'm old
Yeah,
school WWF, so I see it in the background.
yeah.
Favorite wrestler of the time.
All time? God damn it.
I know it's random, brother. I know because I know what
No,
mine
no.
is.
So recently, like, I'm a huge Daniel Bryan fan or Bryan Danielson fan. But back in that era from the 80s,
Yeah, yeah.
um, due to recent things, I will not say Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Macho or Rowdy Roddy Piper. One of those two guys,
Ah,
like just the mouth on them, right? But in
yeah.
terms of like in-ring work, probably Bret Hart, not to sound like
Most
everybody
technical
else.
guy. Most
Yeah,
technical wrestler. The Undertaker was always my
he's
guy,
great. He's
even
great.
until
He's
look
great.
perfect, perfect.
He's
Renzo
great.
Del Castillo, thank you so much. I appreciate you once again. Please, everybody, don't forget to get the book. It's called Still, Amazon bestseller, and don't forget to continue to listen to Los's Lounge. Magic Mind, you're in the building. Thank you for all your support, Renzo. I hope you had a great time.
I had, if you just give me 1 second, because I want
Take
to
all
say
the
this.
time you need, my brother.
I had a fantastic time. I really enjoyed talking with you. And again, I appreciate you sharing your platform with me. All the listeners that you've cultivated by being yourself, by being authentic. And I really think it's what you're doing is important, right? What you're doing in terms of creating a channel to communicate. I don't take that for granted. So I'm just grateful to you. To Harry and Jasmine, though they're not here, who played a part in this as well. I'm grateful to them. And yeah, I hope to come back and chat with all of you about whatever, man. This is cool.
You know, the door
And
is
thank you
always
so much for
open.
reading the book. Thank you so much for reading the book.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for writing it and sharing so much of yourself, not only in the book, but even in our conversation. And FYI, if my show is anything, I've said this before, it's because of guests like yourself, but more importantly, because of Jasmine and Harry, because I can't do it all on my own. And
Community, brother. It's your
community,
community.
yes, thank you, community. Excellent. Well, we will be in touch soon, and I definitely will be posting this online today, but the actual episode will be out sonically to hear either tomorrow and or Friday. So
I
once again,
appreciate it.
thank you so much. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, my brother.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.